Of course, by now everybody has heard the really, really big news. It may not be the best week for the New England Patriots on Sunday. No, obviously that's not the big news. The big news is that Donald Trump has won the presidential campaign and is now the president-elect of the United States. We still don't know the results of some states, including New Hampshire and Michigan and a few others at this point, but we know that even without those, Donald Trump has obtained 279 electoral votes, nine more than the minimum number required to win the election. Let's start with a map of the election as it currently stands, more or less. And you will notice that New Hampshire still too close to call. As of this hour, Michigan too close to call, and Arizona too close to call. But it is mostly academic at this point because it would not change the results. Let's take a look at some of the specifics here as I talk you through some of this over here with the live election map. Number one, Hillary Clinton may well end up winning the popular vote here. Currently ahead, as you can see here, 47.7 to 47.5%. Most of the people who voted in yesterday's election, at least as of the tally right now, did not vote for the winner, Donald Trump. Let's also just look at a few states here in particular. You see New Hampshire, Hillary Clinton just slightly ahead right now. 4 electoral votes would not end up changing the results. If we look at Michigan, you will notice Donald Trump is ahead by 0.3%. That would not change the results when it ultimately is called. And then in Arizona, Donald Trump actually ahead by 4.4% in Arizona, but it has still not been officially called for Donald Trump. Now, what I want to take a look at here is if we look at the change from 2012, this is a map from the New York Times where blue arrows signify a move towards the Democratic candidate and red arrows signify a move towards the Republican candidate relative to how these places voted in the 2012 election. And the thickest concentration of red arrows, meaning a move away from the Democrat and towards the Republican, are very heavily concentrated in Ohio as well as in West Virginia. And you see it throughout the Midwest, in Indiana, as well as in Kentucky, Tennessee, Southern Illinois, Southern Illinois as well. But very interestingly, and this was the area that was most surprising to many of us yesterday, Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Michigan, a lot of red arrows there. Areas that moved to the left during this election, a lot of them in Utah, and that really doesn't have that much to do with Hillary Clinton. It has more to do with Donald Trump and how he just did not work for the Mormon community. Some blue arrows also in northern Georgia and a lot along the eastern seaboard. We did see some sort of activation, movement, enthusiasm for Hillary Clinton there. Now, the two reddest states that I want to show you here, we will get back to our sort of normal map. If you look at Wyoming, where 70% of the vote went for Donald Trump, and you look at West Virginia, where 68.7% of the vote went for Donald Trump, replacing Utah. Utah, often the reddest state, and because of the vote split with the Mormon candidate Evan McMullin, we have Wyoming and West Virginia as the most red states yesterday. Two places I will probably never visit in my life. At least I don't know that I will, but things can change. Life can go in unpredictable directions. Two other states I want to touch on briefly, and this is sort of, I'm trying to find some silver lining in yesterday's election. Georgia. Donald Trump won Georgia by under 6%. And when we think about the possibility of new swing states going forward, Georgia is on the list. The fact that Donald Trump, in spite of winning Wisconsin and being on his way to winning Michigan, as well as Pennsylvania, Ohio, etc., a very red state historically, Donald Trump winning Georgia by under 6 points. And then Texas. We know about the Turn Texas Blue movement, under about 9.2% win there for Donald Trump. It's not the best, but maybe it tells us something about the potential future in Texas. This is really horrible. The First Lady will be someone who worked in the United States illegally in direct contradiction to her husband's own policy ideas and threats on immigration. You guys know, right, that the insufferable Trump supporters that we've dealt with for the last year on corporate media and everywhere, these are going to be permanent staples of the media apparatus now. Truly deplorable.
Right, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of bragging going on, but you know what? They deserve it. This was a decisive election. It looks like Hillary Clinton's going to edge out the popular vote, but the whole map changed.
See,
Every one of our predictions
for
changed.
me, it's not decisive, Rachel, when Trump lost the popular vote, at least as of right now. That to me is not a decisive win.
It's not decisive, but to me, the more interesting part is the gender roles here. Well, it's actually not surprising, but it's just saddening because basically, if you're looking at the females who voted for Obama, that hasn't really shifted. It stayed at around 11 points. But then if you're looking at the males, since they voted for Romney, in 2012 at about 7 points, that's almost doubled. So all of the men really backed Trump.
Yeah, we're going to get to some of that exit poll data. And, I don't want to scare everybody, but the basket of deplorables that could be in Donald Trump's cabinet, we're talking about disgraced clowns potentially like Rudy Giuliani, Newt Gingrich, hypnotherapist Ben Carson could potentially be involved in the Trump administration in some way. And the really disturbing part, and we talked about this during our live stream last night, thanks, by the way, to the 1,500 or so people who joined that. We talked with Sam Cedar from the Majority Report about how he has an 11-year-old daughter now. How can he teach his kids not to be bullies or misogynists or sexists or make fun of people with disabilities when the president is doing those things? And when we look at the example that has been set in terms of respect and decorum and politeness and really dealing with people in an intelligent and reasonable way by President Barack Obama, whatever you think of his policies, how can anyone now raise kids in this way when, hey, but the president made fun of disabled people and the president is a misogynist?
I think that's exactly the way to teach it, though, is how you describe explaining him as kind of the antithesis of Obama and setting it as an example of how not to role model yourself after.
Yeah, it's very, very scary stuff. And I'm going to go into this with an open mind. OK, so can Trump fix trade so it's better for the people like he says he can? Do it. If he messes up, we'll report on it. If he does great, I'll say, hey, you know what? Things improved. Can he fix health insurance? He says he'll repeal the Affordable Care Act, which will take away health insurance from 20 million people. If he figures out a replacement and lets us know and puts it in place, we'll see how it goes. If it fails, it will be on Trump and on the Republicans, which will be controlling both the House and Senate for at least the next 2 years. More on that later. Some issues, there's just no negotiation on, right? The Muslim ban probably is gone. Muslim ban would be absurd. Supreme Court's going to be a disaster, and we have to do everything we can to prevent ludicrous right-wing judges from being appointed to the Supreme Court. What on earth is going to happen with climate change under Donald Trump? I don't know. The legacy of Obama is instantly in peril by the results of this election. We're going to talk about that more on the show. People around the world appalled at this. We will also talk later on the show. What is the U.S. relationship under President Trump to Russia? Vladimir Putin has wasted no time in commenting on that. We will talk about that a little bit later. I don't really remember exactly where I was when I learned that President Obama had won election in 2008 and when he was reelected in 2012. I don't really remember where I was when George W. Bush was reelected in 2004. I think I remember. I will remember the details of where I was when I found out that Donald Trump was elected president of the United States, because this is a historic moment in the worst sense of the word, isn't it?
It is, because of his sheer lack of experience to start with. But there's also about more than 50% of people who woke up and really feel that they lost something when they vote, because they voted for Hillary Clinton, and that shows in the popular vote. Yeah.
When you look at the popular vote, if you take Hillary Clinton, Gary Johnson, and Jill Stein's vote together, then it's certainly, 52.5% of the population voted against Donald Trump. And I think that that's really important.